In a shocking turn of events that has the internet buzzing, 17-year-old Barron Trump did something no one expected during a live national broadcast. What drove this usually private teenager to break his silence? And how did his impromptu defense of his mother Melania Trump leave critics speechless? This is the story of how a son's love for his mother changed everything in just 7 unforgettable minutes. The makeup artist's brush swept across Barron Trump's face with practiced efficiency as he sat in the green room of the National Youth Achievement Awards broadcast. At 17, he had grown into his tall frame, though his mother's gentle reminders to sit straight, darling, still echoed in his mind. He absently adjusted his navy tie, a gift from Melania on his last birthday, as the television mounted on the wall caught his attention. And now, breaking entertainment news, the anchor's voice sliced through his thoughts. Former First Lady Melania Trump faces renewed criticism after her recent charity initiative, with social media personalities questioning her motives and past. Barron's jaw tightened as he watched the cascade of cruel comments scroll across the screen. The makeup artist paused, noticing his tension, but he barely registered her presence. His mind drifted to breakfast 3 days ago, his mother at their Mar-a-Lago kitchen table, coffee untouched, scrolling through her phone with that careful mask of indifference she'd perfected over the years. But he'd seen the slight tremor in her hand, the almost imperceptible dampness in her eyes. Mrs. Trump seems to have withdrawn from the public eye, a commentator smugly declared on screen. Perhaps she's finally realized that. Barron stood abruptly, startling the makeup artist. His prepared speech for the awards ceremony, celebrating young achievers in science and technology, suddenly felt hollow in his pocket. 15 minutes until broadcast. A lifetime of carefully crafted public appearances and measured responses churned in his mind, warring with the image of his mother's quiet dignity in the face of relentless criticism. "Mr. Trump?" The stage manager appeared at the door. "We're ready for your sound check." Barron nodded, decision crystallizing. He'd spent years watching, learning, and growing in the shadow of the spotlight. But tonight, he would step into it on his own terms. In our last episode, we saw young Barron Trump making a life-changing decision moments before going live on national television. But to understand what gave him the courage to speak up, we need to go back 6 years, to a private moment that changed everything. Walking toward the stage, each step echoing in the corridor, Barron's mind drifted to a night in the White House when he was 11. Unable to sleep, he had wandered the quiet halls, footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The soft glow from his mother's private sitting room had drawn him like a beacon. He'd found her there, still in her day clothes, reading what looked like hundreds of letters spread across her antique desk. The elegant slope of her shoulders had been tense, her usually perfect posture slightly curved under an invisible weight. "Mama," he'd said softly, using the private name he'd called her since childhood. Melania had turned, quickly composing her face into a smile, but not before he'd caught the shimmer of tears in her eyes. "Barron, darling. Why aren't you sleeping?" He'd moved closer, drawn by the rare vulnerability in her voice. A letter on top of the pile caught his eye, angry words jumped out in harsh black ink. His mother had smoothly slid it away, but he'd seen enough. "They don't know you," he'd said fiercely, surprising himself with the heat in his voice. "They don't know anything about you." Melania had pulled him close then, her familiar perfume wrapping around him like a shield. "No, they don't," she'd agreed softly. "But you do, and that is what matters." Her accent had been stronger than usual, the way it got when her emotions ran deep. "In life, my son, people will say many things. The truth?" She'd tapped his chest, right over his heart. "The truth lives here. Remember that." She'd taught him then, not through words but by example, how to stand straight under the weight of judgment. How to let critics' words roll off like water while holding on to your own truth. Every morning after that, she'd gone about her duties with unwavering grace, never letting the public see how those letters had affected her. Now, standing in the broadcast studio corridor 6 years later, Barron touched the speech in his pocket again. His mother had spent years teaching him the power of dignity in silence. But sometimes, he realized, love demanded a different kind of courage. Sometimes, truth needed a voice. The stage manager's voice crackled over his earpiece. 5 minutes to broadcast. Barron straightened his tie one final time, his mother's words from that night echoing in his mind. The truth lives here. Tonight, he would give that truth a voice that no one could ignore. If you enjoyed this glimpse into Barron and Melania's relationship, please like and subscribe. Share your thoughts in the comments below. The studio buzzed with pre-broadcast energy as Barron stood in the wings. His childhood friend Tyler, now a junior producer, rushed over with concern etched on his face. "Barron, we've got a situation," Tyler whispered, tablet in hand. "Someone leaked your prepared speech to social media. They're already mocking it, connecting it to your mom's charity initiative. The network executives are in panic mode." Sarah Chen, the broadcast director, approached with quick steps. "Mr. Trump, we can adjust the teleprompter. Maybe focus more on the award recipients, less on the broader community impact." "No." Barron's voice was quiet but firm. The same steel his mother had shown all these years was now in his spine. "No changes." A commotion near the entrance caught their attention. James Morrison, the network's senior VP of programming, burst in with 2 assistants trailing behind him. "This is a disaster waiting to happen. The trending hashtags alone." He turned to Barron. "Listen, son, we can postpone." "I'm not your son," Barron cut in, his voice carrying his mother's slight accent when under stress. "And I'm not postponing anything." Rachel Martinez, one of the young award recipients waiting to be honored, stepped forward from the group of nervous teenagers nearby. "They've been doing this to your mom for years, haven't they?" she asked softly. "Making assumptions, twisting everything?" Before Barron could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from his mother: "Remember who you are, always. With pride and love, Mama." Simultaneously, an alert flashed across the monitors. Another commentator was live on a competing network, speculating about Melania's absence from recent public events. The words questionable parenting and privileged isolation hung in the air like poison. Tyler grabbed Barron's arm. "Your mic is hot in 30 seconds. Whatever you're planning." He paused, then pressed a small USB drive into Barron's hand. "I pulled the archived footage you asked for. It's queued up for the main screen." "But Barron, this could change everything." "Everything needs to change," Barron replied, squaring his shoulders. Sarah stepped forward again, her expression softened. "The world you're about to step into, it's not kind to those who break the script." Barron thought of the letter he'd seen on his mother's desk 6 years ago, of her quiet strength every morning after. He thought of the young award recipients behind him, watching, learning what it means to stand up or stay silent. The red light blinked on the camera. 3, 2, 1. If you're moved by this story of standing up for what's right, please like and subscribe. Share your thoughts in the comments below. The stage lights blazed as Barron stepped up to the podium. Millions of viewers across America watched as the tall, composed teenager adjusted his microphone. In the control room, Tyler's finger hovered over the footage cue button, while Sarah Chen held her breath. "Good evening," Barron began, his voice steady. The teleprompter rolled with his prepared speech about youth achievement and scientific innovation. He glanced at Rachel Martinez and the other award recipients seated behind him, their young faces filled with anticipation. James Morrison relaxed slightly in the wings, until Barron reached into his pocket and pulled out the USB drive. "Before we celebrate tonight's remarkable young achievers, there's something we need to address." He inserted the drive into the podium's media port. "For years, I've watched people who don't know my mother tear her apart in the press, on social media, in their comfortable studio chairs." In the control room, phones started ringing. Sarah Chen's assistant whispered urgently in her ear, but she waved him away, transfixed by the monitor. "You see, what these critics don't know," Barron continued, as archived footage began playing on the giant screen behind him. It showed Melania, without makeup or cameras, sitting with critically ill children in hospital rooms. Reading stories in homeless shelters. speaking softly in her native language to terrified immigrant children. All unofficial visits, all uncovered by the press. This is my mother. Not the caricature you've created. Not the target you've chosen for your ratings. His voice carried the same accent as hers now, unashamed and clear. The woman who taught me that privilege demands responsibility. Who showed me that real strength isn't in attacking others, but in lifting them up when no one's watching. In the wings, Rachel Martinez wiped tears from her eyes. James Morrison's phone buzzed continuously with messages from network executives, but he too stood motionless, watching. The footage shifted to a scene from 3 months ago, Melania quietly funding science scholarships for underprivileged girls, the same programs being criticized now by commentators questioning her motives. You mock her accent? Barron's voice grew stronger. That accent taught me 5 languages before I was 12. You question her intelligence? Try debating international education policy with her in multiple languages. You doubt her heart? Let me show you what real privilege looks like. He gestured to the screen, now showing Melania's private work with families affected by the opioid crisis. Privilege isn't about what you have. It's about what you do with it. My mother taught me that every single day, not with words, but with actions you never bothered to see. Tyler, in the control room, noticed social media exploding. Hashtags were shifting, narratives changing in real time. Sarachan had tears in her eyes as she directed her cameras to capture every moment. So yes, Barron continued, his voice carrying the quiet strength that had become his mother's trademark, I am privileged. Privileged to be raised by a woman who turns criticism into compassion. Who answers mockery with grace. Who faces your judgment with tireless service to others. He turned to address the young award recipients directly. Tonight is about celebrating achievement. But achievement without character is empty. Success without humanity is meaningless. My mother taught me that. And it's time her truth was heard. If you believe in the power of truth and standing up for what's right, please like and subscribe. Share your thoughts in the comments below. For 30 seconds after Barron finished speaking, complete silence filled the studio. Then, like a wave breaking against shore, the audience erupted in applause. Rachel Martinez stood first, followed by her fellow award recipients, then the entire studio audience rose in a standing ovation. In the control room, screens lit up with incoming messages. Sarachan watched as social media platforms exploded with activity. The footage Barron had shown was being shared millions of times, with translations appearing in real time across global networks. I've never seen numbers like this, Tyler whispered, staring at the analytics dashboard. It's trending in 47 countries already. James Morrison's phone buzzed again. This time, he answered. Yes, sir. No, sir. I understand it wasn't the planned program, but, he paused, listening. The engagement metrics are breaking records. Yes, sir. They're calling it a watershed moment in. Yes, sir. I understand. Behind the podium, Barron felt his hands trembling slightly as the adrenaline began to fade. Rachel approached him, her own award acceptance speech forgotten. That's what real courage looks like, she said softly. Thank you for showing us. Backstage, veteran news producer Diana Walsh was already receiving calls from every major network. No, she said firmly into her phone, we will not be airing any rebuttals or counter-narratives. What we just witnessed was truth, pure and simple. Either cover it honestly or don't cover it at all. The monitors showed clips from Barron's speech playing across different channels. Commentators who had criticized Melania hours earlier now sat in uncomfortable silence as their own words were played back alongside the footage of her humanitarian work. Sarachan made her way to the stage, script pages clutched in her hand. We still have awards to present, she reminded everyone gently. But her eyes were kind as she looked at Barron. Though I think we've already seen the greatest achievement of the evening. As the ceremony prepared to continue, Barron's phone lit up with a message. A photo from his mother, her first selfie ever, showing her watching the broadcast, eyes bright with tears and pride. Below it, 3 simple words, "My brave boy." Tyler appeared at his side with a tablet. "You might want to see this," he said, pulling up a social media feed. Images were flooding in from around the world, people sharing their own stories of mothers who had faced criticism, of immigrants who had been mocked for their accents, of children who had watched their parents endure public hatred. "Your words didn't just defend your mom," Rachel said, scrolling through the posts. "You gave voice to everyone who's ever been unfairly judged, everyone who's had to stay silent in the face of criticism." In the green room, James Morrison was looking at his own phone, his expression thoughtful. The same critics who had been so vocal hours ago were now publicly apologizing, sharing the footage of Melania's humanitarian work with their own messages of regret. "Sometimes," Sarachan said, gathering everyone for the ceremony's continuation, "it takes one person's courage to remind us all of our humanity." If this story resonates with your own experiences of standing up for truth, please like and subscribe. Share your thoughts in the comments below. As the Youth Achievement Awards ceremony concluded, the world beyond the studio was transforming. In newsrooms across the country, editors scrambled to revise their headlines. The story wasn't just about Barron's defense of his mother anymore, it had evolved into something larger. Diana Walsh sat in her office, watching multiple news feeds. Major networks were pulling their scheduled programming to analyze the footage Barron had revealed. A panel of journalists on GNN sat and chastened silence as clips played of their past criticisms juxtaposed with evidence of Melania's unpublicized humanitarian work. "We need to do better," a veteran commentator admitted on air. "We've been so focused on crafting narratives that we forgot our duty to seek truth." In the studio parking lot, Rachel Martinez's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Her social media followers had jumped from a few hundred to over 50,000 in the space of an hour. "People keep thanking me," she told Barron as they walked to their cars. "Not for my scientific work, but for standing up first, for being the first one to applaud you." James Morrison hurried over, his usual corporate demeanor softened. "The network president just called. They want to do a series, Hidden Heroes, highlighting people whose quiet service goes unrecognized. They're asking if your mother would consider being the first episode's guest host." Barron smiled but shook his head. "That's her choice to make. I spoke my truth tonight, but her story is still hers to tell." Sarachan approached with Tyler, both carrying stacks of messages that had flooded the studio. "These aren't just fan mail," Sarah explained. "They're stories. Thousands of them. Children of immigrants sharing their parents' struggles. People who've faced public ridicule. Mothers who've stayed strong for their kids despite criticism. And this one," Tyler added, holding up a letter, "is from the Children's Hospital Board. They're finally going public about your mom's weekly visits for the past 5 years. The kids are sharing their stories too." Inside the studio, the cleaning crew was preparing to shut down for the night when one of them, an elderly woman, stopped to touch the podium where Barron had stood. "My accent," she said softly to her colleague, "my children are ashamed when I speak in public. Tonight, for the first time, my grandson called to say he was proud of how I sound. Proud of our story." The awards ceremony's hashtag had evolved into a global movement. Hashtag Spread Truth with Love was trending worldwide, with people sharing instances of quiet heroism and challenging snap judgments about others. As evening turned to night, major publications were already revising their style guides. "Personal attacks based on accent or appearance are no longer acceptable," read one memo. "We will judge public figures by their actions, not our assumptions." Diana Walsh's phone rang. It was a colleague from her early reporting days. "Remember when journalism was about uncovering truth, not creating controversy?" her friend asked. "This kid just reminded the whole industry what integrity looks like." In the parking lot's quiet corner, Barron sat in his car, reading one last message that had just come in. It was from his former White House tutor. "You didn't just defend your mother tonight. You taught us all how to be better people. Some lessons take a lifetime to learn, but you mastered them at 17. He started the engine, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges. But something had shifted in the world tonight, a small crack in the wall of cynicism, a reminder that truth spoken from the heart could still change minds and touch souls. If this story of courage and integrity speaks to you, please like and subscribe. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Late that night, Barron found his mother in her beloved rose garden at Mar-a-Lago. She stood among the moonlit flowers, her elegant figure silhouetted against the Florida sky. For a moment, he watched her from the pathway, remembering all the quiet moments they'd shared in gardens just like this one. "Barron," she said without turning, her voice soft but clear in the night air. She'd always known when he was near, a mother's instinct that hadn't faded with time. He joined her by the white roses, her favorites, the ones she tended herself regardless of how many gardeners they had. For a while, they stood in comfortable silence, the way they had so many times before. "You didn't have to do it," she finally said, her accent washing over the words like a gentle wave. "Yes, I did," he replied, thinking of all the times she'd stood tall in the face of criticism, all the moments she'd chosen grace over retaliation. "Because you taught me that strength isn't about fighting back. It's about standing up for truth." Melania turned to face him, and in the moonlight, he saw the pride shining in her eyes. "You know what they will say now? That I put you up to this. That I orchestrated the whole thing." "Let them talk," Barron said, echoing the words she'd told him so many times during his childhood. "We know our truth." She reached up to straighten his tie, still the one she'd given him, but this time, her hands trembled slightly. "When did my little boy become so wise? When my mother showed me that real wisdom is in how we treat others, not in what others say about us." He paused, remembering the thousands of messages that had poured in after his speech. "They're listening now, Mom. Really listening. And what do you think they hear? The truth. Not just about you, but about all the parents who've been judged unfairly. All the people who've been mocked for their accents or their backgrounds. All the quiet heroes doing good work without recognition." Melania smiled, touching one of her roses. "You know why I love these flowers? Because they have thorns, yet they're still beautiful. Like life, it can hurt us, but we choose to bloom anyway." In that moment, surrounded by the garden's peace, Barron understood something profound. His speech hadn't just been about defending his mother, it had been about standing up for something larger than themselves. About showing the world that true character isn't built in the spotlight, but in the quiet moments when no one is watching. "I learn from the best," he said softly. Melania took his arm, and together they walked through the garden she'd created, mother and son, their shadows merging in the moonlight. No more words were needed. Sometimes, the greatest truths are found in silence. The truth about strength isn't in having power, but in how we use it. The truth about character isn't in what we say, but in what we do when no one is looking. And the truth about love? It's in the courage to stand up and speak out, even when standing alone. As for Barron and Melania, they knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new critics, new battles. But they would face them the same way they always had, together, with grace, dignity, and the quiet strength that comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for. This story reminds us that the greatest acts of courage often come from the deepest wells of love, and that true character is revealed not in moments of triumph, but in how we handle our daily challenges. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of standing up for what's right, please take a moment to like and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that matter. Share your own experiences of family courage in the comments below. Remember, in a world that's quick to judge and slow to understand, the bravest thing we can do is speak our truth with love and stand firm in our convictions. Thank you for joining us on this journey of truth, courage, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and son. Thank you for joining us on this journey of truth, courage, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and son.